Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukrainian counteroffensive operation in the Sumy region, and according to information we have during the previous 12 hours, the Ukrainians once again managed to improve their position significantly. And of course now we have just one question: what exactly is happening here and why the Russians are retreating? And to get answer to this question, first of all we should discuss the situation about the NATO summit that is currently taking place. According to information we have, almost every single leader of the NATO country arrived to this summit with the purpose to discuss the current situation. So the sources are saying that the NATO organization itself is probably in the biggest crisis ever since the creation of this organization, and so the members of this organization are trying to find a solution how to use the NATO in the future. And Zelensky arrived to this summit as well. He is going to have a meeting with the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, where most likely he is going to ask permission from the President of the United States of America to buy weapons for money. As for the NATO summit itself, today we have lots of interesting statements. China and Russia are rapidly gaining influence in Africa. Let's not be naive. That was stated by Mark Rutte. Also, he stated that NATO eyes China as next frontline. So it seems that after some kind of defeats in the war with the Russian Federation, the NATO organization are trying to find another front line where they can get success. Anyway, we believe that this is the main reason why Zelensky launched his counter-offensive operation. He just wanted to show the NATO organization and the President of the United States, Donald Trump, that the Ukrainian army is still able to counter-attack to restore control over the territories, and that the Ukrainian army is still able to show something. Today, once again, the meeting between Zelensky and Donald Trump is going to happen, and when Donald Trump was asked what will he tell him, he said that, "How are you?" So this is the message that Donald Trump is going to send Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. So anyway, the Ukrainians launched their counter-attack, and as a result of clashes during the previous 12 hours, the Ukrainians managed to restore positions in the forest in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Sadki. So this is the situation by the end of the 24th of June, and this is the situation by the beginning of the 25th of June. Several huge forests were retaken and recaptured by the Ukrainians, as you can see, as a result of counter-offensive operation. I would like to remind you that during the previous days, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over the settlement by the name of Andriivka. So this information was confirmed somewhere on the 22nd of June of 2025, and we believe that Zelensky is going to use this small victory with the purpose to convince the President of the United States of America to start selling him weapons for money. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously after the end of the NATO summit, the Ukrainians will stop their offensive operation or counter-offensive operation, but at the same time the Russians will increase the pressure with the purpose to break completely the first defense layer. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the northern Kupiansk direction. According to information we have, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the northern part of the city of Kupiansk itself, along the river Voskol. This information yesterday first was provided by neutral mappers and by pro-Ukrainian resources. Yesterday they reported that the Russians began offensive in the direction of the village of Golubovka. Pro-Ukrainian sources made first adjustments of their map, and today we got additional reports, additional confirmation that the Russians managed to establish complete control over these territories and to get as close as possible to the city of Kupiansk itself. Furthermore, according to information we have, the Russians managed to take the first defense layer in the northwestern part of the city of Kupiansk and to almost get to the city of Kupiansk itself. So it seems that the Russians are going to continue their offensive operation in the southern direction, and that the Russians are going to enter the city of Kupiansk from the north. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the southern Kupiansk direction, and this is another area where the Ukrainians during the previous 12 hours carry out another counter-offensive operation. And according to information we have, the Ukrainians managed to clear the area on the Ukrainian side of the river by the name of Nitrius, on the Ukrainian or on the western part of the village of Karpovka. Furthermore, the Ukrainians counter-attacked the Russian forces on the western outskirts of the village of Redkadub, and as a result of this counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians managed to answer this village. As for now, we don't have even a single proof of these reports. We are waiting for additional information, but obviously this is very interesting. At the same time, the Russian forces continue their offensive operation on the line between the settlements of Redkadup and the village of Glushenkova. So most likely Ukraine attack in the area of Redkadup was just let's say outflanking maneuver with the purpose to slow down the Russians and to stop their offensive operation further in the northwestern direction towards the city of Barova. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Constantinoka direction. This is another area where the Ukrainians counterattacked Russian forces along the Seversky Donetsk-Donbass canal. So according to neutral mappers, this territory was restored under control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Telling the truth, since the beginning of Russian offensive in this area, we haven't received even a single confirmation that the Russians managed to secure this territory. I'm talking about geolocations or videos. We had just of different mappers updates of this territory, but anyway, as you can see, as a result of counterattack, the Ukrainians managed to restore control over this dense network of the fortifications, and we believe that this is also a part of Ukrainian counteroffensive before the NATO summit, just to show the Western countries, the United States of America, that the Ukraine army is still able to carry out counterattacks or offensive operations, and they just need money, they just need additional weapons and arms. At the same time, the Russian forces continue improving their positions in the vicinity of the settlement by the name of Delievka. The sources reported that the Russians are about to begin their major offensive operation in the direction of the villages by the name of Belaya Gora and Alexandra Shultine. As for the Kliban-Bykski pocket, during the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything special, just a report that was published by pro-Russian resources that the village of Alexander Kalinova was secured by the Russians completely, not just the southern, the eastern parts, but also the western parts, which is already the southern part or the southeastern part of the village of Yablunovka. So the battle for these two villages are about to be finished. Now let's talk about the Dnipropetrovsk direction. The Russian forces continue their offensive operation, as we discussed in the previous videos, in the direction of the settlement by the name of Udachne. The Russians are trying to shorten the distance to the railways with the purpose to establish certain FPV drone control or fire control. At the same time, the Russians continue their pressure from the eastern side, and according to information we have, by the beginning of the 25th of June of 2025, the Russians have established control for more than 30% of the settlement, and the Russians continue their offensive. The main purpose of the Russians in this area is to get to the border between the Dnipro region and the Donetsk region, so we are talking about this territory. And the most important update is coming from the Novopavlovka direction. We have changes on the ground, as you can see. The Russians, as a result of offensive operation, after very heavy clashes in this area, managed to secure the village of Yalta completely. Today we got several videos from this area. First we got this video how the Russians began their artillery preparation, and right before we started making this video we got another episode how the Russians managed to secure the village of Yalta completely. So once again, this is the first episode of artillery preparation. Then we have several episodes how the Russians destroyed temporary deployment points around the settlement. Then we have episodes how the Russians were FPV droning the rest of Ukrainian positions, including FPV drone operators. And in the final part of this video we can see lots of moments, lots of episodes how Russians were raising their flags in different parts of the settlement of Yalta. Currently we can count up to 5 episodes or 5 flags that were raised in different parts of the settlement, and based on this video and based on all these episodes we have adjusted the territory of Yalta under complete Russian control. So, for example, this is the situation by the end of the 24th of June of 2025, and yesterday we got first reports that the Russians entered the village of Yalta from the southeast, and today, by the beginning of the 25th of June of 2025, we have colored this territory completely, because now we have no doubts that the Russians managed to secure this area and to establish complete control over the settlement. Furthermore, this morning we start receiving first reports that the armed forces of the Russian Federation began advancing in the area of the village by the name of Zirka, so most likely this settlement also will be taken by the Russians during the next several days. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.